We talk national and local politics. Mr. Latimer goes to Washington and a new face in the mayor's race. The Point starts right now. George Latimer defeated squad member Jamal Bowman to represent Westchester and parts of the Bronx in Washington, where he faces a topsy-turvy time. Question number one, though, what is goal one for Congressman George Latimer?
Well, Marcia, thank you for having me back. I think I have to be realistic about where I'm at. I'm going to be in the minority, and I'm going to be a freshman in the minority. So I want to set priorities that are district-oriented that I think would be substantive, things that involve supporting affordable housing, making for a cleaner Long Island Sound or the Hudson River. There are macro issues in the society. I'm going to be part of a Democratic group that takes positions on those things. But if I want to accomplish anything at the end of 2 years, it's got to be on very specific things. And it could be on infrastructure issues. It could be on environmental issues. That's where I'm going to try to put energy and time, because I won't have seniority on my side, and I won't have intrinsic power on my side. So I'm going to have to be hardworking and clever.
But those things are going to matter to people who you represent.
Right. And that's what I heard when I was on the doors, not only in the primary, but in the general election. People talked about how their lives need to be made better by the decisions that government made. I certainly did that as a county executive and in other positions that I've had before. So that's my focus in going to Washington. The people of Westchester, the people of the Bronx that I represent have certain needs. Let me address those as a priority issue.
So, you know, because the House is really sort of almost, I mean, it's pretty close. I mean, they don't have like an overwhelming mandate, the Republicans. So do you think there's going to be more bipartisanship because there's going to be a need to get Democratic votes to support things, to get Republican votes to support things?
Well, I think on some issues, bipartisanship will work. Republican members of the House from New York, as well as Democratic members of the House from New York, want to reestablish the state and local taxation
Very
deduction.
important to us.
That's important, and I think there's bipartisan support for that. So hopefully there'll be progress. President Trump, during the campaign, alluded to the fact that he was prepared to restore, I forget, all or part, but whatever it is, I think that's an area. I've mentioned already a couple of areas that I think we can find bipartisan support on. Clean water. Working to make sure the Hudson is cleaner and the Long Island Sound. So I think that's an area of bipartisanship. We're clearly going to argue over the major issues in the society that we've been arguing about. And I think the unknown factor as we sit here today is those secretaries that become heads of their departments. Do they really intend to deconstruct those departments? And if they do, then we're going to have battles over what that deconstruction looked like. If Bobby Kennedy does become head of HHS and decides that he wants to get out of the vaccination business for childhood diseases, there's going to be a battle, and I'm going to be on the side of those battling. But if we can find common ground, we'll look for it.
You know, I want to talk to you about Bobby Kennedy because right now he has this lawyer who's been helping him pick candidates. His name is Aaron Spiro, and he has filed a suit against the federal government asking them not to certify the polio vaccine. And I wonder, you know, that's just the beginning of what looks like an anti-vaxxer movement within the Department of Health. And the concern, I think, is legion among people worried about deaths.
This is insanity. I'm of an age where the Salk vaccine came out just about the time I was a little kid, and I was vaccinated. No little kid wants to get a shot. I didn't want to get a shot either. But it protected me and my cohorts, my baby boom generation, from what was a crippling disease, polio, in the prior generation. And then all of the different childhood vaccinations you get for measles, for chicken pox, smallpox, all of these different diseases. Some of them have been eradicated, some of them have been lessened. To go back and revisit that because you have a philosophy about vaccinations, to me, is just simply insane, and it puts people at risk. Now, I understand that a lot of the anti-vax movement came out of the COVID crisis and the way people felt they did not want to take a COVID vaccination. And COVID vaccination came along quickly to deal with the pandemic. But the other issues that we're talking about have been settled science over 50+ years. So as an example, you know, and I knew Bob Kennedy back in his environmental days when he was with the Riverkeeper, and he was committed to environmental protection. But what he's saying now about public health makes no sense to me, and I think there'll be a significant pushback. You know, if he gets to be, if they confirm him or not confirm him in the Senate, I can't tell you. But if he is confirmed and he's going to advance those policies, there's going to be major pushback on this.
But when you say major pushback, what can you do in Congress? I mean, I want to point out one thing, too. The World Health Organization has already reported that the lack of vaccines for measles in a lot of developing countries has led to a 20% increase in measles around the world, and that could also happen here. And is that something that this country really wants?
No.
And do you want to then jeopardize children who could come down with all kinds of childhood diseases?
I think when you look at those facts, and I believe those facts to be true, that colleagues that I have across the aisle who by partisan affiliation, you know, will want to give the president the benefit of the doubt. But when they look at something like that and what those effects are, I expect there's a bipartisan effort to push back on changing policies that fall upon settled science. And there's going to be testimony. It'll be heard in various committees. And then, of course, the Congress holds the power of the purse. If someone wants to move in a certain direction, and it's within the Congress's ability in a continuing resolution to continue to keep the government open with certain provisions in it, that we're in a position to mandate that certain thing happens using the power of the purse in this particular area and in others. But I think sometimes, too, it's spotlighting so that people understand what's at stake, and they start calling their congressmen, including congressmen on both sides of the aisle, and say, do not do this. Do not wreck our strategy for protecting children against dangerous diseases just because you have some ideological anger about vaccinations.
But what if he, as Secretary of Health, were to say, yeah, it's great. I think the United States should not certify a polio vaccine, and he does it unilaterally. What power does Congress have to stop that?
I don't know that it's just within his authority alone to be able to do that. And I have to confess, since I'm not sitting in the Congress yet, there's much I have to learn about what our procedures are. But I use this as an example. A president has a right to pick the people that he wants to serve in these positions. But there's a check and a balance. It's been built into the Constitution, advised and consent by the Senate. And if the Senate consents to Bobby Kennedy, then Bobby Kennedy has a certain amount of power, but doesn't have unilateral power. And I think in this particular case, the president and people around him would be wise to recognize what outrage will come from the civilian population if you try to change this. And if you change it in any way and you start getting bad results, you start getting more children sick, more children dying because they're not properly vaccinated, as they have been for the last 50, 70 years.
Well, let me ask you this. You know, we talked about salt. What about congestion pricing? The president also has said that if he gets elected, he's going to try to stop congestion pricing. Good idea, bad idea?
Well, when we've talked about congestion pricing before, here's the fundamental problem with the issue. It's been tied directly to funding the MTA, and the MTA has a huge capital gap. And congestion pricing, in fact, in and of itself won't solve the full gap. But to the people that have come to me and said, well, we don't like congestion pricing, we think, okay, what's the alternative plan? Do you have an alternative plan? Nobody's offered an alternative plan.
Well, the alternative plan is to get more money from the federal government to fund the MTA. I mean, you can argue, look, the MTA has 47% of the national ridership, gets 17% of the federal money. There's a disparity, but that doesn't mean that they're going to get it.
Right, but the point is making that case. When you look at every Western democracy, if you look at the metro system in Paris, the underground system in London, the nation understands the value of mobility in Paris and mobility in London and in Tokyo and in Rome and so forth. So we have to try to make that case. And the key would be for me as a New Yorker. Now, I've run a bus system in Westchester County, second largest bus system of ridership in New York State. The important thing to understand is that other parts of the country that don't have mass transit have other needs. They have needs for water access. They have needs to dispose of waste. As a New Yorker, I'm happy, and others are happy to support their needs in their portions of the country. They need to understand the need that we have for mass transit. It's not just New York either. It's Philadelphia, Chicago, Washington, some of the other major urban centers, Boston. So that's the argument we have to make. And if congestion pricing were not to happen and there would be no money, we would see a degrading of the commuter rail and the New York City subway system. Not good for our economy.
On that note, we're going to leave it right there for now. Up next, a new name in the race for mayor, Jim Walden. Attorney Jim Walden wants to run New York City as a political technocrat, but he has to decide if he'll run as a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent. So let's talk about this. You are not currently registered in a party. You were before 2006. You were a Democrat. What are you going to do if you run for mayor?
Well, I'm certainly going to take the independent line. And Marcia, honestly, first of all, thank you for having me on. And secondly, I think that New York City is not just ready, but eager for independent leadership. We are all tired of the clown car that our political system has become. Mayor Bloomberg did a really good job during his first 2 terms, not so much during the 3rd term, closed a lot of hospitals, closed a lot of schools, closed a lot of firehouses. And then we had de Blasio, and I have many opinions about him and now Adams.
Oh, go ahead. Explain.
Yeah. Well, I'll just first say we need a mayor who has not just no integrity problems, but is an anti-corruption crusader. The problems with corruption in our city are solvable, right? We need someone that has the tone from the top, that is going to have enforcement, monitoring, and real consequences for people that engage in.
But see, while I get your point that you want to run as an independent because you are not beholden to a political operation, on the other hand, the reality is that the political party does give you some leg up in terms of exposure and support. So, isn't it difficult for an independent to run in a multi-candidate field and win? I mean, if you were to run as an independent in the general election, you would face a Republican and a Democrat. That might be a hill too far to climb.
I don't think it's hard to climb at all, because I've looked at the data. Right, I'm, as you said, I'm not sure I'd say I was a technocrat, but I certainly can be both a regular guy and someone who really cares about deep policy and data. And I've looked at the voting data. I looked at the voting data in the last several elections and in the presidential elections. And when you really look at the map closely, what you see is a lot of election districts that have swung. And my job is to identify those people that have been unhappy in whatever party they are, whether they are unhappy Republicans or more often unhappy Democrats, and to target them, because when they hear me talk about making decisions in an apolitical way based only on good policy, it is refreshing.
So look, it's a crowded field no matter which party you're talking about, the Democrats or Republicans. So how will you differentiate yourself from all these other people who are running all different kinds of campaigns?
Yeah, so I already have. I mean, first of all, let's be honest about what's in the current field. There's a lot of people that align with socialist ideas. I am not a socialist. I believe in the free market, and not because I'm a corporatist. I grew up from the school of hard knocks, right? I grew up in the bottom of the barrel. I am one of the few candidates in the race that really, I was almost homeless, and I would have been homeless if a family hadn't taken me in and let me sleep on a floor for a year. I failed out of community college, so I've been at the bottom rung. I believe in the free market because I've seen what it can do in terms of innovation and prosperity. So that in and of itself differentiates people, because unlike the rest of the field, I believe part of the solution to our problem is not vilifying the business community, but supporting them, small businesses alike. Small businesses in this city are over-regulated. You talk to any small business owner and she or he will tell you that HPD, environmental, all of these agencies are all over them, taking a piece, taking a piece, taking a piece.
You're going to stop that?
Well, I'm going to significantly decrease the regulatory burdens, which just amount to cost. There are people
But the city runs on the fact that they can collect this money and it goes into the general fund budget.
Well, it's funny that you say that. Let's talk about landlords for a second. Do you know how much back fines landlords in the city owe that's not been collected? $800 million. So the city does a terrible job about collecting this money, and when you really look at how much is outstanding, you realize that city government has worked in a lot of ways, but the last 23 years, I've been filing lawsuit after lawsuit and it doesn't matter whether it's a Democrat or a Republican administration, the government does some things incredibly well, and it does other things very poorly.
So Eric Adams, the current mayor of the city of New York, has said that he's going to run for re-election, but he still has to face a corruption trial. Now, you're a former assistant U.S. attorney in the Eastern District, a federal prosecutor. What do you make of the case, and do you think that should disqualify him from seeking re-election?
So, first of all, I believe in the Fifth Amendment, and I believe in someone's right to defend themselves. So I don't think that the people that are trying to score political points by telling him to step down, I don't think that's the American way. So I want to be super clear about this. I think he has a right to defend himself, and I don't think that he should step down. Now, if
Does he have a right to run again?
He does have the right to run again, and the only way that he shouldn't run again is if Kathy Hochul, the governor of the state, believes that he's not doing a good job and she asks him to resign. And since his indictment, and we can talk about the allegations against him, he's made a lot of progress. He's appointed some good people. He's course corrected a bit. His policies are still terrible, and he's still compromised. He's negotiating with the new immigration czar, and everyone is concerned that he's going to essentially sell out the migrant community.
Well, but wait a second. Let's talk about that. So you are a law enforcement guy. You came from the Eastern District. So what he is saying, because I had to cover it, what he is saying is he wants to cooperate in getting people convicted of crimes deported. Is that a good idea, a bad idea, or something we shouldn't even anticipate?
So, first of all, I think that the idea that the federal government is going to send an army of jackbooted thugs into the city to start rounding up people, I think that that's overblown. But I do think that we can agree on two things. Migrant families should be protected, right? They deserve their due process. They shouldn't be...
Wait a second. So say you're a family, but the man of the family, I hate to be sexist, but somebody in the family commits a serious crime. So you would keep the family together and keep them here even though one of them committed a crime and was convicted? So
there's a lot of complexity here, but it depends on whether or not they filed a political asylum claim, right? So what I would do with those, first of all, I'm just telling you, convicted of a crime or not convicted of a crime, I would keep families together during the period of time that the process is playing out.
But somebody's convicted, then what happens?
Well, it depends on what kind of crime that they're accused of. Even families in New York City or other places, they can get separated, if you will, if there's someone in the household that was... Would you allow the NYPD to cooperate with ICE agents, federal immigration? Within limits. Within limits, I would. The limits? The limits are go after the single adults, and that's the primary pool of people that have been convicted of crimes that are serious enough to warrant deportation are single individuals. Start there. That is the low-hanging fruit. Keep the families together, whether or not someone has a conviction. Keep them together, even if you keep them together in a more secure setting. There are lots of different ways that we can deal with the the migrant crisis if we're thoughtful and if we don't treat one size fits all. So families deserve to be kept together to the maximum extent possible. Individuals who are convicted of crimes should be deported, and frankly, they should be detained pending their deportation proceedings, because those proceedings, there's going to be a court case that is happening. And so for those people that are here under false pretenses, they've been convicted of crimes in their home countries, they should be detained while their deportation proceedings are pending. And would you increase work permits? We have about 30 seconds left. Would you try to get them more work permits? I would. I mean, I think that there are a lot of people in the migrant community that came here because they want to work, and I think that there is where I could negotiate with the federal government without being compromised to try to give space for us to deal with each community separately and to give them each a bespoke way of developing policy so that if there are people that can work, that want to work, they have valid political asylum applications, we can keep them here. Okay, we're going to have to leave it right there for now, but we'll have more right after the show on our streaming channel, CBS News New York. Thank you for joining me. Why is loneliness such an issue in our society? How do New Yorkers cope with it during the holidays? They're weighing in on Your Point. Why is loneliness such an issue in our society?
People don't seek each other out and find consensus.
We're just too interested in our own selves.
The females in New York City.
Oy vey.
No, I like that. Why oy vey?
Well, Because I'm in a committed relationship for 50 years, so I am not lonely, but I sense that that is an issue.
Because people are in the pursuit of happiness, they don't know what happiness truly is.
With technology today, people don't communicate directly with each other, and I think that could help to create loneliness.
I think the internet makes everyone feel close, but substitutes sort of real interactions with these contrived internet interactions, and it's not the same.
I don't know, it's been any different than in the past.
Do you think the problem's getting better or worse?
Oh, I think it's getting worse.
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 I think the computer issue is a major reason.
We're a fractured society.
As we get more entrenched in Instagram and TikTok and whatever else.
People become isolated because they're talking to an object, a computer, rather than a person themselves. The interaction is not there.
I see kids, I have 8 grandchildren, and I see the difference between them, my kids, and my childhood.
I think it's about empathy and relating to people who are lonely. I'm not a lonely person, and I do try to have empathy. I'm not sure what I can do to help.
Do you think the problem's getting better or worse? People being lonely?
Worse.
Why?
This generation is up. I'm sorry.
Is there anything that we as individuals can do to help people overcome loneliness?
Listen.
Show empathy, help people in the time of need.
Reach out to them.
Check in with people, reach out to people.
If I'm at church and I see a stranger, I always make sure that he or she feels, or they feel welcome.
Be kind and understand that people go through personal battles, and it may not be obvious, but everyone is struggling. So be nice to one another.
Just check on them, I guess, call them, make sure they're all right, simple.